Hey Downtown Van.
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 You're listening to Hey Downtown Van, hosted by the Downtown Vancouver BIA.
Hey Downtown Van, welcome back to another episode of the podcast. I'm your host, Sofia Laratta, and today I'm joined by Downtown Van President and CEO Jane Talbot, as well as our special guest, Brent Toderian. Brent is the former chief city planner of Vancouver and what we call a downtown expert. If you didn't know, Downtown Van, with partnership with City of Vancouver, has shut down 5 blocks of Granville Street for the World Cup. It has now been extended to Labor Day long weekend. It's called the Granville Street Pedestrian Zone, and that's what we're here to talk to Brent about. Brent is an expert on pedestrian streets. So we really hope you enjoy this conversation. We hope that this inspires you to come down to Granville Street, and let's get into the episode. Brent, thank you so much for joining us today.
My pleasure. Glad to be here.
So you have an unusual background with downtowns in general and placemaking and pedestrian streets particularly. Tell us about yourself.
I think that's a fair question because the problem with being the former chief planner of Vancouver is people know me for that, and that has a whole bunch of responsibilities associated with it. And because of my posting on social media, I particularly like to talk about things like mobility and transportation, how important that is for better cities. So some folks out there actually think I'm a specialist in transportation or something like that. In my career, I've been a city planner and more than a city planner, frankly, for 34 years. And I have aggressively resisted the notion of being perceived as a specialist because I love cities and I just want to be involved with everything about them. But if there's anything that has been close to me embracing a specialty, being known for one thing, it's downtowns. And in a parallel universe, I was a downtown specialist because in my early 20s, I leaned in right into downtown revitalization in the 1990s in Ontario and across Canada when so many downtowns were struggling, ironically with issues like streets that were closed down to cars at the time and were failing, competing with the suburban malls and such. I leaned in big and even in my 20s became probably one of, if not the busiest advisors and consultants to BIAs and downtowns on downtown revitalization. And in a parallel universe, I had an opportunity to actually start a Canadian version of the National Main Street Center in Washington, D.C., which, for those of you who don't know, is an organization that trains and advocates for better downtowns, particularly in the United States, but also in Canada. And I was actually the first Canadian to go to do an odyssey to Washington, and over the course of 4 weeks, got certified as a professional downtown manager and certified a Main Street expert and such. All in my 20s, because there was a path I perceived where I would be a very, very specific downtown specialist. And then I rejected that notion and became the aggressive generalist that I am now. But my first love is downtowns. I live downtown. I work in downtown. And I would probably champion downtowns for free if it wasn't my job because it's not only my personal and professional passion. I will say to anyone who pays attention that our downtowns are too big to fail. Our downtowns are the economic engines of our cities and states and provinces. And frankly, we've got to do a much better job at strengthening them. So I think that's worth saying. So I've done just, I don't know, somewhere close to 25 downtown or Main Street strategies. I've spoken to and advised BIAs all over Oxley or their equivalents all over the world. So there's a reason why I'm helping and working with the Downtown Business Association here in Vancouver. And it isn't because I was the former chief planner. Frankly, to be honest, I would say that a lot of chief planners wouldn't necessarily be good downtown planners and don't know much about downtown revitalization specifically. But it's worth pointing out that it happens to be not only an area of expertise, but a particular passion.
I guess you kind of already alluded to it, but I would like you to expand more about why downtowns are so important before we get into talking about everything, because that's the basis of why we're here.
There is this frustrating narrative that goes on that says, well, downtown's been getting enough attention, enough money. We need to put more energy into the rest of the city. It's our turn now. Downtown's had its turn. That fundamentally doesn't understand the nature of cities, certainly in North America, which are often downtown focused, and the nature of urban economics, where the downtowns are incredibly powerful, dramatic economic engines. What I like to say is if you've never come downtown, if you don't shop downtown or live downtown, if you've never even thought about downtown, you are benefiting significantly, whether you know it or not, from the downtown being strong. And you would be punished significantly, no matter where you live, if the downtown is weak. It may be in the form of taxes, how much taxes you have to pay, because downtown is subsidizing everyone else. It's the one place where you can spend your tax dollar or put your energy, and it benefits everyone across the city. Every other part of the city, the effects and the benefits are more localized. But a dollar invested in a strong downtown to keep the downtown, especially from getting so weak that it becomes an economic negative, which has happened in many, many cities, is a dollar well spent. So this whole downtown councillors versus suburban councillors, downtown thinkers versus suburban thinkers, fundamentally doesn't understand the reality of the situation. That's not ideology. That's dollars and cents. It's facts about taxes and tax generation and how the entire city region, even the province in the case of a downtown like Vancouver's, benefits or is weakened by the downtown being stronger or weaker.
Well, thank you for that. I think that lays a good foundation for the rest of the conversation, for sure.
One of the hot topics for downtown Van right now is the pedestrianization of Granville Street.
Mm-hmm.
We just had 5.5 very successful weeks of FIFA, and we are week 2 into a 7.5 week extension post FIFA that was unplanned, but originally unplanned, right? So you are an expert in pedestrian zones. Tell us a little bit about what makes a pedestrian zone successful, and just kind of enlighten us on what you think about the Granville pedestrian zone.
Well, I could be cheeky and say one of the first things I think is don't call it a pedestrian zone. I think I was saying to you the other day, that sounds like something out of the Hunger Games. But I'm not just picking on the language. As we know, all of us know, how we brand these things is very important. And I just call it a pedestrian street, but it doesn't roll off the tongue when one says Granville Street Pedestrian Street. So fair enough, they call it a zone. The pedestrian streets as an experience, well, first of all, it starts off with the notion that even pedestrian is a funny word to choose because it sort of suggests the thing to do with there is to walk, or that this is a transportation question. We're not driving on that street, we're walking on that street. And that's the magic trick. Well, that's certainly part of it, but it's not a place to walk just. It's a people place. And this is more placemaking than transportation. No disrespect to my friends in transportation departments, but I always cringe a little when I see it being run out of the transportation department, because that tends to make it feel like a transportation conversation. When what it is a city building conversation, a downtown revitalization conversation, and a placemaking conversation, an economic strategy, as much as it or more than it is a transportation strategy. So it starts with the notion that this is placemaking, and that what you're trying to create is a people place, a central place, a hub, a heart. And that's true of a lot of North American cities, European cities. I work all over the world to make it clear. So a lot of my contextual references, certainly since I was chief planner here over the last 14 years, is more educated by my international work. But certainly in North America, a lot of cities, including Vancouver, has struggled with that idea of a central square, a central place. And I've often said, as many Vancouverites have, that we go to the edge for our public life, the seawall on the water, because we're drawn to water. And that makes a lot of sense for us. But it's not an either or. We should have a central heart. We should have a central place. We've thought about Robson Square. We've thought about creating, our friends at the Vancouver Public Space Network years ago had a competition called Where's the Square? Where is our central heart? a street can be a heart. It doesn't have to be a square. And certainly we've seen in other contexts here in North America too, that if you do that transformation of the biggest public space we have in cities, which is our streets, and think of them as public spaces, then we can have remarkable success in placemaking, and not just social success, but economic success. So I think it starts with branding and rethinking how that space is used and how it's perceived by the public. It's a lot about what you add, not about what you take away. The easy part is to say we're taking away cars, but I've seen so many failures, including in this city, where you just take away the cars and say, hey, we're done, mission accomplished, and nobody comes. Because you have to take away the cars because that's how you create the space, but it's what you replace the cars with that creates the magnet, the sticky street, the notion that there are things there to draw people and to keep them once they come. So it's not just what you add, it's fundamentally, or not just what you take away, it's fundamentally what you add. There are so many rules of thumb for successful streets, and we could talk about most of them. What I will say is in the context of Granville Street, pedestrian streets can be applied as an idea to a relatively successful commercial street. And we've seen that in many parts of Europe. An already pretty successful retail street gets pedestrianized, frankly, to create more space for people walking, because that's what they're doing once they get there, they're walking. And then it becomes not only more space for walking, but it creates a destination, a magnet, and makes the street even better. And to be clear, pedestrian streets in many parts of the world are not just successful economic streets, they are the most successful economic streets. The pedestrian street in Copenhagen is the top shopping street in the city. The pedestrian street in Oslo, Norway is the top shopping street in Oslo. The pedestrian street in Reykjavik, Iceland is the top shopping street in the city. And it wasn't that before it was pedestrianized. So it can take a successful street and make it even better. In the context of Granville, it's a challenge street. And you have to be very careful and very smart and strategic about trying to use it as a revitalization tool when one of the goals is to sort of stop the deterioration of a street. Doesn't mean it's harder, it's different. It's a different kind of challenge, but it means it's not enough to just get the people who are already coming to stay longer. And that's why we lean in so much in the planning around Granville Street, around programming and activations and things to draw people, because there isn't a base magnetism to the street as it stands. There isn't a base reason for people to come. So if you just close it down for cars and say, come on in, people won't come. You have to bring them, and then you have to keep them. And so the strategy is fundamentally different when you're working on a challenge street compared to a lot of, and I see this in North America particularly because we've tried to use pedestrian streets as a revitalization strategy, but the techniques we've used are the techniques European cities and Australian cities and other city parts of the world have used when they apply it to already successful streets, and then it fails.
Have you seen a street like Granville struggling turn around because it was pedestrianized?
Yes, but it's not 100% causal. First of all, just as I said, just pedestrianizing isn't enough. You've got to program, you've all of that. And I say that, and that sounds pedantic for me to say that, but the truth is pedestrianizing is such a simple word. People are going to walk there. But we know it takes much more than that. So, but if you do the full strategy, what you can do is turn around the perception of the street. What you can do is create new energy and attention. You can get the private sector to rethink their negative perception of the street and turn it into a positive perception of the street. And suddenly you've got interest in taking retail space on the street or office space above the street, which is body heat for the street. And so I've seen it be the catalyst. I've seen it be starting point for a turnaround, stabilization, and then the turnaround, the upswing. It won't do the whole job by itself. But what we've said, and certainly in the context of Granville Street, to me, it is an absolute no-brainer about the do you do it or not, because nothing else was having a success. Transit, although is a good thing on the street, was not enough to keep the street from continuing to deteriorate. There wasn't even reasons to put pressure, more significant pressure on the solutions that the street so badly needs. So my read of the chessboard was, without this move, and I don't mean FIFA, because FIFA is too easy to compartmentalize. The World Cup is too easy to say, that's different, so I'm putting it over here. What we needed was a normal experience of a street, a sustainable experience of a street, to prove that the street wasn't just about special places, to prove to everyone, particularly the market, who would then reinvest in the street. It's in some of my work in cities, it's called the but-for argument. But for that decision, the street wouldn't have turned around. I am absolutely 100% sure of that. Now, does that mean doing the pedestrian street is going to guarantee the turnaround? Nope. It is not an automatic failure, as some people are suggesting, and it's not an automatic success where they say, build it and they will come. Neither of those things are true. But making the critical decision to do it, and then doing a very good job with how you do it, and having everyone rally around it instead of being negative, then you're putting the building blocks in place for success. You're giving this space permission to succeed.
Yeah. Well, what I will say is, when the World Cup was here and we did the 39-day whatever pedestrian zone, the opinion and the perception of Granville Street changed so much. Like usually online, me and Ellie and Janice were scrolling through our Instagram, and it's a lot of hate about Granville Street. Even since the World Cup ended, I would say it's majority still more positive than it's ever been.
Yes, but that would have went away. As the echoes of the World Cup become further and further away, that would have been forgotten. How do I know? Because it happened during the Olympics in 2010. Because I, for one, was saying we have to keep the momentum up, and it didn't happen for various reasons.
But now,
that's why this was so badly needed. That's why I wrote an op-ed piece saying, for God's sakes, let's not fail again. Let's not make the same mistake we made during the Olympics. And I say we because I was there. And although I was at City Hall, I was the chief planner at the time. And although I can say I can feel not terrible about myself because I was calling for it, I didn't succeed. We didn't get it over the line. And so this time we had to. Now, the decisive decision on council, I talk a lot about what differentiates 6 cities in the world that I work for some of the best, most innovative, most inspirational cities in the world. The cities you think of, I've probably worked for them. And I've been asked, one of my most common questions is, what differentiates the cities that are achieving like that and the cities that are not? And the answer is culture. And I don't mean museums. I mean an attitude and a culture around action and risk-taking, risking what I call competent failure, not afraid to fail, but you learn from it. That is competent failure. Instead of risk aversion and apathy and letting windows close and momentum die. That is the difference. Literally, that is the number one difference between the 6 cities that are already far better than our city and yet are still constantly striving to do even better because that culture just keeps going.
Yeah.
Vancouver has been slipping in that culture. And I saw the conditions coming to a head again, which was what made me write the op-ed piece. And I'm not the only one. I don't say my op-ed piece is magical, but other people were saying the same thing at the time, saying we can't let this slip away again. Mm-hmm. And it's a moment to show that we are capable of decisive action in the context of this kind of innovation. We have decisive action on other things, but not on this kind of thing. So it was an important, powerful moment to make that decision. But now the pressure's on, as I know, and you certainly know, because now we got to pull it off. And again, it's not a foregone conclusion that it will succeed. We have to do a great job, but everyone has to embrace that this is a royal we. This is a collective we will either succeed or fail at this idea actually getting achieved. And let's remember, 69% of the population of the city of Vancouver, 63% of the region, which really staggered me, that at a regional level, there was that level of support. for this staying a pedestrian street after the World Cup, that is huge. And I say to every one of those 69%, now your job is to come out to the street and help make it a success with your presence, with your existence on the street, adding vitality and eyes on the street, and your dollars supporting the downtown businesses.
Yeah. Well, I guess that brings us to the next question, which is there seems to be this high expectation of the pedestrian zone now post FIFA. People think that we're going to have the same crowds. And if we don't have the same crowds, then we're failing. How can we set those expectations? Like, how can we correct those expectations? And what is success right now for this new era of the pedestrian zone?
Well, the answer is embedded in your question. You set the expectations by setting the expectations, by being very deliberately and intentionally say, no, that expectation is wrong and will never happen. And if you try to frame success that way, I'll tell you right now, we're going to fail because it was a dumb expectation in the first place. Anyone who thinks we're going to have the crowds that we had at FIFA is wrong. And I'm being kind. That there is zero chance of that. Now, if I'm wrong on that and we have some level of the crowds, I will be the happiest wrong person you've ever seen. But it's not going to happen. It's very unlikely. But that is the wrong definition of success. That's like saying our definition of success was the last Sunday of the Olympics after the Team Canada beat Team USA in overtime to win the last hockey gold medal. And the street was literally crammed with flags. That's not the bar. And positioning us for failure by saying that's the bar is more than unhelpful. It is sabotage. So what we need is the right realistic definitions of success. And I'm a big fan of setting clearly and repeating over and over again a very clear, ambitious, but possible definition of success. And that definition of success is a good, sustainable, vibrant, lively, busy in the context of a normal street and a good pedestrian street, public place in the city that feels like it is the heart and the hub of a civic space. Mm-hmm. It has evolving nature along its blocks. It's busy at different times of the day, not just at night, but also during the day and weekdays. It's busy for all kinds of people, not just young people on Friday and Saturday night, but families during the day, office workers during the weekday, etc. So these are the definitions of success, and it will grow over the 7 weeks. Don't expect. Frankly, the first week outperformed in my expectation because it was a turnover week. And it could have been a lot quieter. But actually, we saw a fair number of people, and particularly kids and families. So it exceeded my expectations to a certain extent, given that we were in a transition period and really just getting the word out. The way I would put it is, for definition of success, the easiest starting point of success is we attract people. We draw people. You see people on the street. That's definition level 1. Success level 2 is they stay longer. It's easy to draw people. Doesn't feel easy all the time, but it's actually the easiest part to draw people. What's hard is to keep them. An example is if you have a special event or a programming and it draws a crowd, but as soon as the event is done, they scatter, they leave. So the second level of success is that you keep them longer. As I've said to you in other contexts, you can double the number of people on a street in 2 ways, either by doubling the number of people who come, and that's actually hard, or you can double the length of time that they stay. And that's actually easier because once you have them, you just have to keep them not wanting to leave, frankly, because there's too many interesting things to check out that they hadn't expected. So level success 2 is you've not only attracted them, you kept them. That's what, again, I talk about a magnetic street. It not only draws you, but once you're stuck, you don't want to leave. Yeah. Level 3 is that you go into the shops and services. You spend money because this can't just be a civic success. That's really important. But it's also got to be a business success. Too many streets in North America have failed because the civic champions say it was a success because the people came and enjoyed themselves and really loved being in that space. But the businesses, some of the businesses often, not all of them, but some of them say, well, but my numbers didn't go up. Or maybe they even went down. And the truth is some businesses don't benefit from a pedestrian street, but a lot of businesses do. Mm-hmm. And so, and the media loves to go to the juiciest, most negative anecdote the one business person who says, my business lost money. And they don't go to the rest who were more positive, because maybe that's not as juicy a story. So it's got to be not just a civic success, but a business success. That's level 3. Level 4, the whole this is a social experiment of perception change. That when you ask anybody anywhere, do they think well of Granville Street? You've fundamentally changed that perspective. You need those other 3 levels of success to get there, but that in itself is a definition of success. You've rebranded the street. You've changed the perception, not just during a special event, but then it went back to normal, but in perpetuity. And then the last, and this is the one where we won't know by the end of this 7 weeks, but it's critically important to our thinking. We will have success if the quarter of the retail spaces get a lot more interest and some leases to fill up that space, and not under leasing, but good leases for the kinds of businesses we want in the vision for the street. Some of the other existing retailers may up their game in terms of the quality of the retail offerings, and of course, not just the retail offerings, but the patios and restaurants and pubs as well. The above grade, the leasers, the commercial leasers, find it easier because of the attention that we've given to the street to get people interested to lease that space, because that's more body heat. And then, as we know, in a city like Vancouver, there are developments being proposed all over the downtown constantly. And you want Granville Street to be a positive for that investment confidence to do a new residential building, a new office building, etc., which needs the street to give it confidence, but also the street needs it to give the street body heat. And I stress that 5th level definition, the retail stores in, the new developments, because we tend to think about the cost of a 7-week extension like this, the budget for it, but the return on investment opportunity, when you think about those spin-off investments, are staggering. I mean, people would be shocked to know the kinds of tens of millions, even hundreds of millions of dollars in play that are affected, that are already have been affected by the negative perception of the street, because there's a big cost of doing nothing. And the streets has been a negative up till now, to turning that around into a positive, and the kind of return on investment we could have. I'm never flippant about when you're spending public money and a budget like the one in this project. But when you compare that to the return on investment potential here, it's staggering. And all the naysayers who are complaining about the budget, I haven't heard them talk about that even once.
I'm going to go back to something from a couple of minutes ago, and that is the expectation that the pedestrian zone would deliver on FIFA-level crowds. Mm-hmm. I actually don't think the community has that expectation at all. I know our businesses don't, mm-hmm. and we've been very clear when we talk about it, like, do not expect this. Yeah. However, that narrative has been hijacked by a select few who are using it as an example of why this isn't working. Right. So what's your perspective on that?
Well, we know that although the actual support for this extension is significant, and I want to be really clear on that, because sometimes there's a danger to giving too much oxygen to the naysayers. But I also don't like ignoring the negative narratives, because if you're not careful, they can grow legs and get bigger. So if they need to be called out, they need to be called out. And the notion that we got a little too excited, and I've heard this, that we got a little too excited about the World Cup and we got a little too enthusiastic, but the extension was a mistake. Hell no. Big misunderstanding, and I'm going to put it that way, of the nature of the opportunity and situation here. The mistake, in my experience, would have been failing again to capture the momentum. The Board of Trade, Destination of Vancouver, the Downtown Business Association, a majority of its businesses, the majority of the people, all got the common sense here that this isn't just, we don't want a fun party to end. This is a recognition that, and I've heard it so many times, if we don't capitalize on this, what were we possibly thinking? How could we drop the ball again? And that is the mistake. That would have been the failure. So I give credit to council and the various parties on council. I don't like the politicization of decisions like this, which can be quite a negative. But I give credit to all of council for being decisive in the way I was talking about a little bit ago. It's the smart cities are the ones that seize the opportunities and don't let them go by. But you can say, I didn't support it, it's too expensive. You can say all those things. But by claiming it's a mistake because we got a little too enthusiastic about the success of the party, misses the experience, the evidence, the education around, and the understanding of the land economics and the return on investment in play. There is a very strong business case that this can and should be a very smart investment. And to be clear, it doesn't even have to be a huge success for it to be a good return on investment, because although it's hard to prove a negative, if we had let it gone back to normal, I've seen this too much. This is my painful experience. The street can actually get worse after, because you have that kind of letdown that, oh, well, that went back to normal so quick. I have whiplash from it. And you can actually end up with a more negative perception of the street. There was a big cost and a big risk to doing nothing. That was the point of people like me who were saying, don't miss this opportunity.
Yeah.
Well, we've said it before too. We say it all the time. If we hadn't have extended it, I'm sure there would have been people complaining about us not extending it. We do extend it. People are complaining about it being extended. So
yeah, so few though.
Yeah,
so few.
Yeah, very few.
Yeah,
very few, and that's important to stress. The success of and you're right, Jane, to give credit to the World Cup experience. I don't mean to dismiss it. If we hadn't had that to get everybody's eyes on Granville Street, we wouldn't even be having the conversation about extending it. So that was the first level of success. And we all know that it didn't succeed just because of the World Cup. Because I took a good look at all the other host cities and all the other ones that had done pedestrian zones. No one else had our success. No one else did.
I'm going to jump in and just give a plug to our team on that and our partners, City of Vancouver, VPD, Fire and Rescue. But we understood the assignment and we knew how important it was, not just for the host city, being a FIFA host city, but also for the street. And we didn't hesitate when the opportunity came. We were like, yes, of course. And then when the opportunity came to extend it, we had very, very little time to make that decision, whether to do it or not to do it. And the team was exhausted. 39 days of a pedestrian zone during FIFA is a massive lift.
And no proper preparation time.
Right. And we came back, we were at the table, and every single one of us agreed that there is no way that we could say no to this. And our team's been amazing.
Well, you could have been risk averse and said, if it fails, we're going to be blamed. So not worth the risk.
Right.
We already won with the World Cup. Why would we risk that success? That's what a lesser organization might have thought.
And it was great too. Like the City of Vancouver has been amazing to work with, like coming from a place of yes. And so I'm just really happy for the street.
That's one of the turning points, I have to say, because City Hall, we see this in the Montreal experience of their pedestrian streets. City halls often get a lot of credit for the successful pedestrian streets, sometimes more than they deserve, because the BIAs are often the unsung heroes. And BIAs are smart enough to know, let City Halls take the credit, because then you'll get support for it again next time. And that's a very pragmatic way to look at it. But City Halls are often not set up. And I say this as someone who's worked for BIAs and City Halls. City Halls are not often positioned in terms of their culture, their bureaucracy, even their protocols and timeframes to pull off what a BIA can do. But they can kill it. They have the power to say no. And that is what happens. They rarely can make something happen, but they commonly stop things from happening. And they didn't stop. The best thing I can say about Montreal is they didn't stop the great things from happening that have put Montreal on the map. And here in Vancouver, they didn't stop it. And I'd say from my observation, they leaned in and had a culture of yes. And that's certainly what we're seeing in our interactions with them. And I give them credit for that. because they're smart, passionate people, and they want this to succeed 100%. So that's part of, of all the things that we want coming out of this first pilot. This is the first normal pilot. It's not a full summer normal. It's a 7-week normal pilot. But in all of our learnings and our building blocks for next year's full summer pilot, that culture, that relationship, the trust between your organization and City Hall, et cetera, is going to pay big dividends next year. But we've had this conversation in the context of the work. There have been times when I might have thought, well, City Hall might say no about that, and they didn't.
Oh, pedestrianization is in the Granville plan, right? Like
that's very different from the fear that can pop into your head when you're asked to do something. And like I said, because of the timeframes that you guys were given, you could have been risk averse, and a lot of organizations might have been. That's what I mean by risking competent failure. We're not going to have the kind of success that we would have had if we had the months to properly order the things we wanted, let alone even do the right thinking. But we're okay with the level of success we'll have because we'll get the learnings on things and it'll position us better. That's what a learning organization does. But if you're risk averse, you never get the chance to learn. This is what I've observed from the truly impressive, smart cities and organizations around the world. They're willing to risk a less than perfect success because it gets you to the better success.
What do you think about full pedestrianization of Granville Street?
I'm neither for it nor against it. I'm on the fence. I like evidence. I like pilots because they aren't going through the motions for me. They are literally opportunities to test it. If you ask me right now if I thought pedestrianization is a good idea and should be the answer, which is what City Hall has done. They've made it the answer in the long term. I'm not there yet. Why? Because I think Montreal was right with their 13 pedestrian streets that are first summer pilots, then extended summer pilots for more blocks, and then more and more extended into the shoulder seasons. They go into October, but they don't go into the snow seasons, etc., because they know that it's a lot harder when the snow is falling, or in our case, when the rain is falling, and a little bit of snow from time to time. It's a lot harder to get that first definition of success, which is people coming. And then they do want to get out of there because it's wet. So I think the concept has to be tested. And I'm actually open-minded about the idea. But for the folks that say it's a no-brainer, we should just make it pedestrian permanently, I'm not there. I'm not there yet. And I think Montreal's getting this pressure too. A lot of people have said, why haven't you just made it permanent by now? And Montreal is right to not do that. They are right to resist that pressure.
Mm-hmm.
So if I've never asked you your opinion on long-term pedestrianization, you live downtown. What do you think about it?
I love it. I mean, I've always questioned why North America didn't have more pedestrian areas like Europe. In Europe, there's different squares all over the city. Like streets are shut down all the time. It's open 24/7. People are always out. Families are always out. Kids are always out. And everyone of all ages is out. So I think it's a good idea.
Can I give you one more? You remember what I said at the beginning about that this is a tool that's applied to successful streets and unsuccessful streets? If this was a conversation about Yaletown or Robson Street, they are closer to the conditions necessary for it to work year-round because they're already strong retail streets. If you try year-round on a struggling street, it'll fail. Why I'm still open-minded is that the Granville plan is a long-term plan. If we can strengthen the street through the pilots to the point where the street is self-sustaining and can succeed in the winter, maybe.
Yeah. It was interesting during the Granville Street planning process. The city worked with us quite a bit on gathering our membership together and talking about what our members wanted or didn't want. And they spent a lot of time with our Granville Street businesses, obviously, the Granville Street plan. And at the time, we could not have an easy conversation around the long-term pedestrianization of the street because the needs of the street are urgent and they're acute, right? And we could not conceptualize what a successful pedestrianized Granville Street could look like.
Right.
Now, though,
permanent street.
Yeah. Now, though, we're starting to be able to visualize what that could look like, and conversations are starting again, and we're starting to look down the road a little bit more to be like, okay, what more could we do? And that, I think, is a success story of
absolutely
of the first 5 weeks, but also of just even the week and a half that we've been through of phase 2.
Can I just add? You described me as an expert on pedestrian streets. Where that is true is that I've been obsessive about studying almost everyone I can possibly find anywhere in the world and answer the questions, why is this one succeeding and this one failing? And there is a North American versus European versus Australian versus Latin American versus different contexts and such. And I think North America has come a long way, because in the 90s when I was working on this, you couldn't swing a stick without hitting a failed pedestrian street. Spark Street in Ottawa being the poster child or the boogeyman of why this idea fails. Yeah, but it's never had anything there that actually would draw people, and so pedestrianization just removed the only thing that was there: cars, and now and then it became empty. Admittedly, for those of you in Ottawa listening, I haven't been to Ottawa for a little while, so maybe it's doing great these days. But I'm from Perth, Ontario, which is just outside of Ottawa. So that was one of my quintessential, that and Montreal, old Montreal, were my early experiences with so-called pedestrian streets. So it's the notion about permanent pedestrianization. We tend to picture European success stories and we picture strong streets. What I like about the opportunity in the long-term plan is that one of the criticisms of the pilot is that it didn't have the fundamentals in place in order to succeed. I think that's wrong in the context of the summer pilot, but I think it's right in the context of permanent pedestrianization. I think you do need fundamentals in place to be able to prosper in the winter. You need a fundamentally strong enough street to prosper in the winter because it has enough gravitational pull. We're not there, and the summer pilots is one of the key ways we will get there.
So pedestrianization in Europe, we all know, part of the culture there, really. It's part of why you go to Europe. And in the United States and Canada, there have been some success stories, but not a lot. Why do you think Europe is so much, frankly, better at it than we are?
Well, to be clear, Latin America is better at it than we are for different reasons than Europe. Australia is better at it than we are. And they're actually a lot like us in terms of car culture and suburban sprawl and all of this. So it's interesting to look at the multiple contexts because if you just compare it to European success stories, like the lazy answer is, it's Europe, that's their culture. We don't have that culture here, right? Always starts with car dependency, car obsession. If your downtown has already surrendered too much space to cars, it's very hard to claw that back. Even the European cities that surrendered a fair amount of their downtowns, and a surprising number of them did in the 1970s, they came to their senses within about 10 to 15 years and started taking it back. So it never got nearly as bad as ours. So we're digging ourselves out of a big car culture, surrendered car space hole. And that's both a physical problem and a cultural and attitude and perception problem. So that's a starting point for why it's so different and why it's so hard here. Also, part of that car sprawl was we devastated our downtowns with suburban shopping malls, less in Canada than in the United States, but both a lot more than in those other parts of the world. So our downtowns became weak, many of them. And like I said, ideas like pedestrian streets work better on strong streets rather than weak streets. So you have this idea that's a great opportunity in other parts of the world in reasonably strong downtowns that when we went to Europe and came back and tried to do it in the 1990s here on struggling downtowns, and we didn't even understand the importance of things like programming, we just thought, well, we'll have two anchors and a pedestrian street, it'll be just like a shopping mall. So it'll succeed. Boy, were we bad at that thinking. And a lot of my work in the 1990s was trying to revitalize downtowns that had made that mistake and were trying to dig themselves out of that hole. So a lot of it's not as simple as saying, well, we just like cars more. We had physically changed our our cities because of car obsession that made it harder for this idea to prosper. Now, flash forward to now. Yes, we now know and understand through social media and such the successes. You don't have to go to Europe anymore on holidays to come back and think, I love pedestrian streets. I wish we had one in our city. I'm 57 years old, almost 57 years old. That's what it was like in my young. You had to go there. Now you don't have to go there. People see those. They watch the podcasts and such. They see that, and they don't have to go there to think, why can't we have those nice things in our city? So that has changed. The whole advent of better city building and better community building has improved quite a bit. Our downtowns have been strengthened in many contexts, or have gotten better, certainly better than they were in the 90s and early 2000s. So the conditions have changed for this idea. I've said that the conditions have caught up to the idea, where suddenly we have conditions that are closer to those other places where this idea has worked. That's the real reason why we can now have this conversation. People, I think, I've heard people say, well, we've come to accept the idea. Well, yes, but that's not, it took a lot more than that. There's been a lot more that's been changing that has now positioned this idea for success instead of failure. But it's still hard here. And that's why we've heard from people who have said, well, just close off the street and people will stroll. Not in North America generally. Not even in Montreal, but in Montreal, there are different conditions, and their streets are reasonably strong streets to begin with, but certainly not on Granville Street. That would be a recipe for quick failure.
We talk a lot about turning Granville Street into a 24/7 economy and really building out the daytime economy and offering places for families to come and hang out. And one of the things that I love about pedestrian zones is how it really does draw families. And I grew up not far from Ithaca, New York. I actually moved here from Ithaca, New York. And in the 70s, they had pedestrianized State Street, I think. And my dad used to drive up there like 30 minutes. He had 5 kids. And he would empty out the station wagon, and we would just play on the street all day long. And we loved it. And we had ice cream. And we were just on a street, just loving life. And we always thought, our family's going to come to Granville Street. And I thought, I bet they will. When it's pedestrianized, I bet they will. And my gosh, so
they have.
I am seeing the parents come and just letting the kids run. And it reminds me so much of Ithaca, New York, but on a much bigger scale. And I am loving seeing so many families and so many kids. And it's great. They'll come.
And it connects to this narrative that it's not even a narrative that says, well, the street's unsafe. What are you going to do about that? It's not that dramatic. It's a kind of a sort of, well, how are you going to address perceptions of safety? And when we say that all the time, I worry about that having too much power, because it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The more you talk about it, the more people would say, well, maybe I shouldn't bring my kids downtown. I had lunch on Granville Street right before I came here, and I sat down in one of the nice elaborate benches that you guys have done, which are great because like 8 people can sit on it all at once communally. And there was a dad with his little baby telling her, and the baby is too young about the street and feeding her French fries. And I thought, you don't do that on an unsafe street.
Yeah.
Even dads are a little more oblivious to safety than moms are sometimes. But nobody does that on a street they perceive to be unsafe. And so many times in the last week and a half, I've taken a picture, and then I'll go back and I'll count. Holy cow! There's 8 kids in that picture. And I hadn't really perceived it when I was just looking through the lens. And I call kids and families indicator species of a safe street in perception. And it's got to be in reality too, because perception follows reality, sometimes gets ahead of it. And to me, that's already told me we've already had a significant success in changing the perception of the street because parents won't bring. We have a huge success in downtown Vancouver that other downtowns would kill for. We have 120, 130,000 people living in the downtown peninsula.
138,000.
Yep, there you go.
Oh wait, now it's 142.
I wasn't sure what the latest number was, so thank you.
Yeah.
Other cities would kill for that, and we planned deliberately, and this is putting on my city planning hat on. We planned deliberately for families, including making sure that there were schools and daycare, and so in that body heat, that population, local population, we've got a lot of people living who can walk to Granville Street. They don't have to drive or even take public transit, and their families. Four or five elementary schools planned or about to open in the downtown peninsula. That's a family context that other downtowns, including our friends down in Seattle and such, who are a lot like us except for this, they would kill for that. And we've gotten it by good planning, good design and such. And it's this huge opportunity. But they will not come from their house in downtown to Granville Street specifically if they perceive it to be unsafe.
Yeah.
Full stop. And they have. They have come.
And early. They're there
fast.
early.
First day.
Yeah, like first thing in the morning.
Yeah, but first day for sure, but also early in the morning. Like if you walk down there at like 8 o'clock, 8:30 in the morning, the kids are playing on the sit-down soccer and the parents are having coffee and it's lovely. I actually throw that out as a bit of a challenge to your listeners in the downtown business community because I was wondering if the residents and the families would come from day one or if they would need to be enticed. But I thought, and we had this conversation, I thought the low-hanging fruit are the people in the office buildings. We just have to get the people in the office buildings out of the office buildings, say, not only come and have your lunch, because that's only an hour or a bit where it's busy, come out and have your meetings, your staff meetings out on the street. And so you folks have been spreading the word on that. But I'd say my perception of what we'd see on the first week was the opposite. The families came right away. And I'm waiting. Where are the office people? I want the office people still to come. But the families were the sort of early adopters in the idea, which is fantastic. You know what I think is interesting? And we talk about you can't just close a street. We know that, especially a street like Granville Street. We do know that. And I remember the very first day the street was closing. It wasn't activated yet. It wasn't anything yet. The VPD had just closed it off. And I went in to do an interview. And about an hour later, I came out and I took a look at the street. There were already people on the street. So people love the opportunity to walk down the center of a street, right? With your coffee and to hang out. And now that there are things to do and things to see.
They went to the center of the street pretty quick. This is
really quickly. This
is some inside baseball, but there are street use experts that study where people go on a pedestrian street. And there's often a commentary that says when you give the street back to pedestrians that you had previously surrendered to cars, it takes a while for them to feel comfortable walking down the center in the street. They stick to the sidewalks maybe for a week or two sometimes. And I've seen and read these studies before where how do you get them to feel comfortable taking to the center of the street? And the narrative is the street can seem a bit empty because the people are still walking on the sidewalks. Yeah. We didn't see that. They were right in the middle, right off the bat. And as a matter of fact, ironically, you might want them going to the sidewalk because then they see the businesses better, ironically. But it's interesting to me how quickly they claim that space psychologically. And that shows confidence in the space and also a bit of I'm taking this.
Is there anything that concerns you about the success of the extension of pedestrian zones?
You know, this is a tough thing to talk about because there's a thought process, and we've talked about this, Jane, where we don't want to talk about failure. We want to talk about success because we don't want to give failure energy, but I don't want to skirt around it. I think you don't give it energy, but you don't let it grow because you haven't been addressing it enough. And I've got sort of, in the context of Granville Street and maybe lots of streets, I've got 5 what I would call elephants in the room that could, if not make it fail, certainly make it a less of a success. And we've talked about two of them already. One is the completely wrong definition of success that just makes it very hard for us to succeed because you set us up for failure with a ridiculous definition of success. And another one is the negativity that we've talked about, that where if you give it negativity too much power, if the retailers are talking about the negatives on the street, they are literally scaring away their potential customers who are watching that news story, or the counselors, if they're saying this was a mistake, you're telling people don't bother coming, or investors don't bother investing. And why would you want to do that? Why would you want to sort of root against the success of the street? So that negativity can be a bit insidious, and it can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. Those are two of the elephants in the room. Another one is the potential for politicization. And this is an election year where normally ridiculous politics becomes completely lunatic level. And it's shaping up to be a tough election, and maybe a close election. So that means our silly season, as is often referred to, is being extra silly. And all the voters out there who think, well, wait a minute, whose idea was this? Do I support that party? If I don't support that party, does that mean I have to not support this idea? That can be very dangerous. You can sort of almost root for an idea like this to fail based on who supported it or not in an election year. And that is a big problem, a big risk. So first of all, I would say don't do that, because this is either a good idea or it's not a good idea. It doesn't matter the politics of it, right? But also, the truth is, when you actually look at who supported this, you had one party launching the proposal, and you had another party of a different political stripe not only supporting that proposal, but sort of upping it a bit through some motions, making it is stronger. So, and that's across the political spectrum, which just reinforces for me the notion that this isn't right or left. This is smart or dumb. This is, are we committed to the success of the city and this particular idea or not? So we've got to be very careful during an election year. That is a big elephant in the room. Okay, the fourth is you can be allowed or even directed to do this, but you can also not be, at the same time, not be given permission to succeed. And this is quite common. I've talked about this a little bit in this conversation already. But picture the situation where okay, here's your direction, here's your budget. You're not allowed to change any rules. You're not allowed to the TVs that were there for the World Cup, they're gone, because our normal rules don't allow that. World Cup is over. There are all sorts of ways you could have been, as I put it, prohibited from succeeding by all the things that you need to succeed. We know we need to succeed. City Hall says no to, or someone else says no. The businesses say no to because they don't like that idea. So there's all sorts of ways where you, as I put it, you're directed to proceed, but you aren't given permission to succeed. I think we're doing fairly well in terms of that elephant in the room, at least so far. But there's going to be other moments. So during this 7 weeks, where we might have to challenge again the status quo rules and say, do you want this to succeed or not? Are you giving us permission to succeed? That's an elephant in the room. And the last one, I think, is it's about the nature of how the street is challenged. We need to be able to have a candid conversation about the challenges of the street. 1/4 of the retail space is vacant. We have a concentration of what were supposed to be temporary emergency SROs. During COVID, put in place SROs as single room occupancy hotels for folks who would otherwise be homeless. I realize many of the listeners don't use that 3-letter acronym. Concentrated on on the end block, which makes that particular block very hard to program, very hard to consider in the context of our goals around families, et cetera. And we need to be able to talk about that honestly without it being a problem of negativity that scares people away from the street. And frankly, we need to have the honest conversation about why the levels of government that promised that this would be short-term ideas how long are we? 6 years. That's longer than I thought. 6 years long. That is not temporary.
6.5, if we're really counting.
Whatever your perspective about social services in the downtowns, certainly that's where a lot of the support services are for our most vulnerable people. But it does have an effect on the economic engine of the downtown, which ironically is the way we generate taxes, which pay for things, including the social services. So we all, including our most vulnerable, benefit from a strong, economically strong, particularly downtown. And you can't pretend that ain't true, because it is. And it comes down to just a promise was made that these would be temporary. These SROs are no places. They're not compatible with the vision for the street. They're also not great places for the people who have no other choice but to live in them.
Yeah.
And there's potentially not only life safety issues, but certainly quality of life issues. And so it was never meant to be a long-term strategy. So frankly, there needs to be a reasonable conversation about why isn't there more urgency? There needs to be more urgency to address that issue. And we're going to be talking about I can tell you right now, we're a week and a half in, but we're going to be talking about that and have to talk about it honestly at the end of the 7 weeks, because whatever our assessment of success is at the end of 7 weeks, that's going to be significantly affected by that concentration of SROs. That is the elephant not only in the room, it's probably crushing the coffee table in the middle of the room. But we have to be able to have that conversation without derailing the fundamental conversation about how to create a great street for people, including our most vulnerable people, where it's diverse, where everyone's welcome, but frankly, where you're not pushing out the rest of the elements of success because too much of a concentration happened on a place that's now trying to be a pedestrian street. That's five elephants in the room. That answers your question, what am I nervous about? There's probably lots. I am strategically nervous about a lot of things because we have to thread the needle and get this right in a lot of ways. Because I'll go back to my first initial message, which is this idea was never going to automatically succeed and it was never going to automatically fail. It takes us doing a great job. It takes all of you, your listeners, the business people in the buildings that need to get out of their offices and support the street. The people who live around the downtown, in the city, across the region to come out and support the street because your body heat, your presence literally lends life and vitality and success to the street. It's going to take all of us to make this idea work. And if we all just expect someone else to make it work, it could fail just from lack of attention, lack of buy-in. And that would be the most disappointing thing. The idea that we actually make all the right moves and do the right things and the people just decided not to come and support the idea. I don't believe that's the case because 69% of Vancouverites supported this, wanted this. So now's the time to come out and support the street.
Yeah, it will not fail. I've said this to you from the beginning, and I know that you're the expert on these streets. I know you've seen these streets fail in the past. The extension of the pedestrian zone, you mark my words, it will not fail. I know that people will come and support it. I know that because when we give people reasons to come to Granville Street, they come. And we've seen it even in the rain over the last, we say week and a half, but it's really been a week and 2 days, right? But people are dancing in the street. They're learning how to swing dance. They're learning how to line dance. They're having fun and they're on the street. And I, you know what? I'm just going to stand here right now and declare it to the world. We will not fail.
Well, what I'll say is a week and a half in, it's succeeding. It's succeeding in the way we would expect a week and a half in. Yeah. It's going to keep growing, probably in the way we would expect it to grow over 7 weeks.
Yeah.
And the technical expert in me can say, yes, it can absolutely fail. But the experienced expert in me says part of it succeeding is to have exactly that attitude, Jane. Because it's going to take, this is not rocket science. It's not physical science. It's not the laws of physics. It's a social science. This is us not letting it fail. That's how it will succeed. So everyone needs your attitude. I'm not dissing your attitude. We all need it. And then it becomes the opposite of, it becomes the positive self-fulfilling prophecy. It succeeded because we wouldn't let it fail.
Yeah. Well, also, just to clarify one point, the TVs are
Oh, yeah.
on the patios. So they're still there. So come on down to the Granville Pedestrian Zone, watch a game, watch a show, hang out, learn how to dance, get some cotton candy.
A lot of really exciting things planned. So
Yeah.
don't miss out.
So many elements. People have asked, who's this street going to be for? We've talked about families, but the people who were excited during the World Cup, now they can watch the Lions and the Whitecaps and the Rise and the Blue Jays.
And RuPaul's Drag Race.
The people who we talk about the crowds we want. We want the office crowd to come out. We want the day camps. Kids are coming out to the street. We want the convention crowd. When the superhero, the comic convention comes, we want the comic book people out on the street. When the podiatrists come to town, they like walking. So they are going to come out and walk the street. Every convention, the convention crowd, the university crowd, if you're hearing this and you go to school downtown, or you should be out on the street supporting the street. All the different and the sports crowd, the patio crowd, the bar and the sports watching crowd. Yeah, we got the TVs kept. That was an important decision that needed to be gotten right. And it was gotten right. So, it's not going to be one crowd. It's going to be all these different kinds of crowds interacting, coming at different times, coming at the same time, but just constant vitality, diversity, and surprise. Lots of things.
And that's the way it should be, right? Well, I hate to cut off this little convo, but we are out of time. But Brent, thank you so much for joining us. That was such a good conversation.
My pleasure.
Thank you, Brent. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you for listening to Hey Downtown Van. We really hope you enjoyed today's episode with Brent. If you'd like to learn more about our organization and the pedestrian zone, everything that we do, you can visit our website, dtvan.ca. Follow along with the podcast at Hey Downtown Van, and please do not forget to subscribe. Thank you so much for listening.